Good afternoon. Today is the 20th of April, 2021, and I'm here in the West Point Center for Oral History with Colonel Retired Francis J. Monaco, goes by Frank, West Point class of 1970. Welcome home, sir. How are you?
Very good, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Could you please spell your last name for the transcriber?
Sure. M-O-N-A-C-O.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. When were you born?
I was born in June of 1948, okay, in a little town called Derby, Connecticut. And I was the oldest of 5 children. My father was a working class gentleman and was served in World War II. He was a medical staff sergeant when he got out of the war. And my mother had 5 children, and she had 3 foster children. She loved children, so after we started growing up and the house was getting empty, she got 3 more and watched over them. So we had a total of 8 in our family, and that was in Derby. I went to Notre Dame High School in West Haven, Connecticut, and somehow got accepted to the class of 1970 at West Point, and the rest is history, I guess.
Well, excellent. You say your father was a medic during World War II?
Yes, he was.
And he got to the rank of staff sergeant?
I think so, yeah. He was a sergeant. He didn't tell me much about his service there, but I know that he served during the war and in France. He was in France.
Okay.
And I got he passed away a few years ago, and I learned from him the value of service. He told me that West Point would be just like the Boy Scouts of America. He was partially right, okay? And I went off. I was a scout, so I was familiar with some of the things that I needed to have at West Point to continue.
And what did he do after the war?
He served odd jobs. He worked for a company called B.F. Goodrich in Connecticut and Shelton, Connecticut, and he worked with my younger brother in real estate, and they fixed up old houses and resold them in Derby. Derby's a little town outside of New Haven. I was born in New Haven, but lived in Derby.
Okay, excellent. And what did your mom do?
My mom was a housewife, yeah.
Homemaker?
Italian homemaker. Yeah. I learned from her the value of people, and she would often, people would come to pay the rent from one of my father's properties, and she would make them supper, and my father would come home from work and not have anything to eat because she gave it away.
Okay.
She was a wonderful lady.
Well, that is nice.
Yeah.
And 5 siblings?
Yes.
Where do you fall in the lineup?
I'm the oldest. I was the oldest, yeah. My brother Joe passed away a few years ago, and then I have 3 sisters, okay, and then there's the 3 foster children that my mother nurtured, and they still live in Connecticut, basically. Excellent. My sisters do too.
Okay, so your family is all pretty close then?
Yeah, except my grandkids. We have 15 grandchildren, okay, and they're spread all over the country. My son Frank is retired up in Watertown, New York. He's a retired Army Major, West Point class of '96. And my son Mike is a West Point class of '98, and he works out for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency out in St. Louis area. And then Joe is still active duty Air Force. He's going to Army War College equivalent at Fort Leavenworth, okay? And he's Air Force, so it's kind of a 1-year deal for him. He's getting another master's degree. He went to the SAMS course earlier at Leavenworth, so he spent more time at Leavenworth than I did.
Holy cow.
A lot more time. And he's got a big family. He's got 8 children, but we're proud of them all. My son Jeff lives with us in the area of Carmel, New York. And yeah, he's a technician. He works with security systems and cameras, webcams and stuff like that.
Nice, excellent. What were your interests as a boy? You mentioned scouting already.
Scouting, yeah, scouting and fishing. I was a big-time fisherman. I still try to get out there. I have some health issues now, but I try to get out and go fishing. I actually had a lifetime pass from Tony Brown, who used to be the head of DCFA here, I think, one of the agencies here. So I could go fishing at the ponds at West Point without having to get a permit every year. But I also liked computers, you know, when they started coming out. And it was really because of a guy by the name of Farrell Patrick, Lieutenant Colonel Farrell Patrick. As a cadet, I took a course called EF 382, Computing for the General User. And Colonel Patrick was the instructor, and that got me hooked. From that point on, I knew what I wanted to do with my life, was to be involved with those things.
That's pretty cool.
And then my senior design project was a project called EF 489, and it was a macro assembler for the GE 635, which, by the way, was located down the hallway here. There used to be a big mainframe computer down there, and they moved that out to South Post later on, but anyways, that's what I ended up doing in my Army career for 17 years. Worked with computers.
Okay.
After the first 8 years, were involved with the field artillery, jumping out of airplanes. I did a lot of skydiving with the 82nd, and we did test jumping with MC-1-1 parachutes and things like that. And then I ended up single tracking 53, and that was a time when nobody was single tracking 53. So that was 1978 to 1980, and I went back to that. I taught here at West Point from 80 to 83, and then Colonel Kirby in the Geography and Computer Science Department.
Yep.
And I ran this graphics lab. He had a graphics lab there. He went out and got money from different agencies, the Defense Mapping Agency, and they had a big computer in there called the Interactive Graphics Design System, IGDS, which they used to design the space shuttle.
How about
and
that?
so we had one in ES and GS. He got one for them. His deal was, I'd send you a couple cadets to work on your systems. You give me whatever they're working on. And so that's how we got all our equipment financed. He was a great guy, and Gil Kirby. And General Galloway was there too. He was his assistant.
Okay.
And so I ran the graphics lab, and I taught the first class on a microcomputer back in the early 80s, 80 to 83. They had 2 labs set up with Terac computers. They were about $8,000 microcomputers now, which now would be, a thumb drive could do more than what these things did. But anyways, they were set up in the 2 labs, and there was no word processing. So the cadets didn't have a way to word processor. In graduate school, I had written a program called FMT, which was a program that you would take a file and you would embed commands in it like .pg, .ro. PG means go to a new page. .ju, which means justify. And you embed that inside of the text, okay? And the program will read that and then format the output, and then you could print it. So the cadets actually used that program for 3 years, which is kind of funny. And then they got Microsoft Word came out, and some of the other software programs that people use now are used back then.
Wow, that's
but
pretty cool.
They actually used it. And then I taught the first class on microcomputers with the folks, Fortran.
Okay.
What UCSD Pascal operating system. Colonel Kirby wanted me, and General Galloway wanted me to get them introduced to using a microcomputer. So they went into the labs. They didn't have a computer in their desk, okay? It was only in these 2 labs. They went in and they ran these programs using the operating system, UCSD Pascal at the time, but we used a Fortran compiler, and they learned how to program in Fortran. 2 or 3 sections a semester I taught, and then they ended up going on in 1986. Everybody, I wasn't there then, I had PCS, but everybody at West Point started getting their own personal computers in 86. Right. And then they went to laptops, I guess in one of your years, 94, 95, 96, they started getting better computers and better hardware. And I was there, I came back to West Point in 92, and that was the beginning of the internet, okay? Right. And so USMA.edu, along with some people in the EECS department, I was the Director of Information Management for a couple years, and we started the internet, USMA.edu. Google was just starting, okay? There was no Google in 1992, just starting. And we started getting the cadets online where they had mail, where they could send mail to anybody in the world, not just people at West Point, which is the way it was before that. It was just an internal mail system. A guy by the name of Master Sergeant John Junod was the instigator of this thing called Gmail back then. Now Gmail has been bought by Google, and they're using it worldwide. But we had our own email system, and it was pretty good, but it didn't go outside of West Point or Department of the Army. And so Junod helped us get online with the internet. So the internet wasn't around in 92 and 93. It was just getting started, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time. My dream assignment was to be the commander of Information Systems Command, West Point, and I did that for the last 5 years I was in the Army.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can we back up just a little bit?
Sure.
So while you were in high school,
right,
there was a lot going on in the world at the time. Do you remember things happening like the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
I remember that everybody was worried about getting bombed, and we were doing drills or getting under your desk if you were at school, or that you never know what's going to happen down there. But everything worked out, and I always had hope that that our government would pull through. that really didn't have anything to do with me choosing to go to West Point. It was more of a financial decision. Okay. Being the oldest and my father working a couple jobs, so he said, you know, I got into a couple different places, but I ended up going there, and I remember Cuban Missile Crisis, and I remember some of the problems that the country was going through back then, even with race riots and things like that.
Sure. You remember the Kennedy assassination?
Yes, very vividly.
What were you doing?
I was in high school. I was in the band at that time, and we had just done a pep rally for a football game, and I remember they dismissed us all and told us to get on the bus and go home, and we did. And then we watched it on television back then. It was terrible time for the country, but somehow we made it through. Yeah, I remember vividly. Vividly.
How did you hear about West Point?
My father heard about it from some of his contemporaries, and I really had never been to the place in my life. And when I showed up at Arvin Gym on our day, July 1st, 1966, I was overwhelmed. I had no idea what to expect, except that it was going to be like the Boy Scouts. That's what my father told me, and it really wasn't like the Boy Scouts. So I after a few weeks, a lot of my contemporaries, a lot of my classmates went to the prep school, and I got lucky and got in with a couple of them, and they helped me. But I didn't go to prep school. I had enough grades and all to get in the first time, but that was probably a mistake. I should have gone to the prep school. But somehow I made it through plebe year, and I think I liked the hard sciences. I did not like history. I did not like English. I didn't like any of those. I'm sorry. But, and I had trouble with those all 4 years, but I gravitated towards mathematics and the sciences, and I did well in those, physics, stuff like that. And finally computers at junior and senior year. Once they started teaching computers here, even though it was Stone Age computers, okay, I fell in love with those and started working with Colonel Farrell Patrick. And then another guy they brought in from IBM to teach the advanced course. It was called EF489. It was a senior design project, and they actually had a deck of cards, IBM cards. I got a couple here, but they were I carried around a deck of cards all second semester, first year, and that was my program. If I dropped that deck, I'd be screwed. I'd be in bad shape. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, I understand.
And that was my program, senior design project.
Okay. Now, before you got into West Point, the Vietnam War was ramping up. Did that concern you at all? No, it didn't. It didn't concern it. I was ready to go if I got drafted or something like that. And actually, when I got commissioned, I went to the 82nd Airborne Division, and we had 3 brigades in the 82nd at the time. One of them was in Vietnam. One of them was doing what they call post-support details, and one was doing race riots. Okay. And I was in the one that was doing race riots. And so, you know, you couldn't volunteer to go in because by the time I got finished with Airborne Ranger and all that stuff was late 1971. And I met my wife on graduation leave. We got married in October of 1971. Our 50th wedding anniversary is coming up this year. And went back to West Point to get married. But we never got assigned to Vietnam because the war was winding down. A lot of my classmates did. A lot of them did. They got assigned to units and went over. You had to volunteer, okay, but I volunteered for the 82nd. That's as long as so if the 82nd Brigade was going there, I would have gone. But they didn't. My brigade did not go. I was in the 1st of the 320th Field Artillery. And our mission basically was to take care of race riots locally and across the United States and to jump out of airplanes. Did a lot of jumping. That's why I'm having problems with my pelvis now. Now, you mentioned our day, July 1st, 1966. What's your most vivid memory of that day? The man in the red sash and screwing that up a couple times, trying to get through him. Back then it was all hims, all males. But and then the parade that we had at the end of the day, and starving to death for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Those are my vivid memories of our day. Getting yelled at a lot, which I deserved, I'm sure. But did your parents drop you off? Yes, they dropped me off, but so they stuck around. They stuck around, but I didn't know that they stuck around. And not only that, but some of my relatives came too. So we lived in Connecticut. It was just an hour drive, about an hour away. So they came and stayed with me all day. I didn't realize that until I think the first time we got to see them was like in the middle of it was middle August. I mean, we had some time where there were weekends that they could come up, and we went out picnicking at Round Pond or not Round Pond, somewhere around West Point. We had a picnic.
Oh, I know where it was. It was down by the boats down by South Dock.
Sure.
And we had a picnic there, and that's the first time I saw my brothers and my sisters. They all came and they said, "How you doing?" I said, "Not too good." So a couple months after that, my grandmother, who lived with us, passed away, and my mother never told me about it. She didn't want to worry me because I was here as a cadet. I remember this vividly. I had an uncle that was a colonel in the Army. He was stationed up in Alaska, my Uncle Lou. And he came down and saw me on the soccer field. And he said, I said, "Look, Uncle Lou, I got to get out of here. I can't take this anymore." And he said, "Stick it out." And he convinced me to stay. And that Uncle Lou changed my life. If I didn't do that, that was plebe year. That was getting ready to go into December and plebe year. We got to go home that December, and things got better. I went back to my scout troop, and they wanted to hear me talk about West Point. I gave a speech there, and I got encouraged by my scoutmaster, Ed Strang. So I ended up staying, made it through a plebe year, and then after that, it was I got better and better acquainted with academics, and that was my strong point.
Okay. In Scouts, how did you do in Scouts?
I was an Eagle Scout.
Okay.
I made Eagle Scout.
What was your project?
My project was, back then it was not as sophisticated as some of the projects now. I had to do something for the church. It was, I think it was had to do with writing a program for an event that they had.
Okay.
I really can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like that. I had to write a program, maybe gather some signatures or something like that. It was paperwork. Nowadays, they're doing very sophisticated things at Eagle Scout. One of my sons was an Eagle Scout too, and he had to do a project teaching people how to do things. So
okay.
I still am associated with Scouts. I go back every year
Okay.
at Old Timers Night, and
Excellent.
they want to hear about West Point and things like that. So I try to encourage them to apply.
Sure. And you said your Uncle Lou convinced you to stay.
Yeah, he did. My Uncle Lou. He was an engineer colonel. He went through. He didn't go through ROTC. He went through OCS. Got commissioned. Served in Vietnam, and was stationed up in Alaska at the time. No, he came back. He was in New Jersey at the time, or somewhere in the States. And he drove over at the West Point, and I was out on the soccer field. I couldn't see him except, like that. They wouldn't let me do anything. So, and he got me aside on the soccer field, and we had a long talk, and I decided that I would stay. And he was my hero, my Uncle Lou, and my father too, but mostly Uncle Lou that day.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. How did you said academically, you said you didn't like any of the social sciences and stuff like that. You gravitated towards the math and the math, science, and engineering?
Yeah, we called it the Green Death back then. It was a big book, and I enjoyed it, actually, the mathematics and anything to do with hard sciences and physics and chemistry. I wasn't a star man or anything like that, but I did well enough to get by, and but once the computer courses started coming, we were allowed to take 2 electives, okay? And I took the two electives in computers, and I was hooked.
And Farrell Patrick was your instructor?
Colonel Patrick, yeah.
Okay.
And he's still around. He lives in Highland Falls, and I talk to him once in a while on email, and but I saw his interview on this oral history a few weeks ago, and I thought I'd comment on it. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
And not only that, but Farrell Patrick, and when I got ready to retire in 1996, he was at a Board of Trustees meeting for the Association of Graduates, and he said to me, "Monaco, I understand that you're getting ready to retire. I adjunct teach at a place called Pace University in New York City." And he said, "They're looking for their first chief information officer." And he said, "Why don't you apply?" And I said, where the hell is this place? And he said, "Well, it's down at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge." And, so I did. I applied, and somehow the HR director there had a son that was stationed at Fort Drum, and that was an assignment that I had previously to my last assignment. She put my resume in a stack to look at again, and then I ended up getting the job.
Okay.
And I was their first chief information officer, and after being the first chief information officer, actually was the DUM up at Fort Drum. So I did a lot of things like that. But
okay. How did you do militarily at the academy after your plebe year?
Plebe year, I was a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and got promoted. I commanded 2 batteries, okay, in the 82nd Airborne.
No, I mean at the academy, how'd you do, sir?
What do you mean?
Like, did you do, you had Buckner, did you do any other summer training like that?
Yeah, I went to AOT. Oh, this is a good story. I went to AOT Army orientation training at
Right.
Fort Bragg with the 82nd, and and they were, of course, they're all jumpers there, and I wasn't airborne qualified, and so there was a bunch of sergeants that said, "Sir, we want to take you on a jump, okay? So you got to observe. You'll be an observer." So they put a parachute on me, and got me all rigged up and all with T10. And they stuck me in the middle of a stick. Okay, I was so uninformed. Okay, they put me in the middle of the stick on a C-130, and and the plane started up, and it caught fire on the runway. The plane caught fire. It was a C-130. I'll never forget. So we all ran out the back of it, and they canceled the jump, obviously. And then I started talking to some people, and I said, they were going to throw you out of that plane, you idiot. And so I said, yeah, I guess so. So what the irony of this is that I ended up getting reassigned to that same battery, okay, when I got commissioned. And I remember the sergeants who put me up to that. His name was Sergeant Jackson.
Right.
Sergeant Jackson. And I said, okay, Sergeant Jackson, I'm going to jump master school, and every jump that I ever go on, you're going to be manifested on that jump. And I did. I manifested him on every jump we were on. And it turns out later on in life, I ran into his son, who was a cadet, okay? Sam Jackson. He recently passed away. But anyways, we became very good friends, and I told him a story about his father and how he tried to trick me into jumping. But that's a true story. That was on Army. So during Army orientation training, we did stuff for the 82nd. We did displays and firepower demonstrations and stuff like that. The most memorable thing that happened to me after commissioning was being at Fort Bragg and watching a heavy drop demonstration and a low altitude parachute escape. The plane comes in real low, and a parachute drags M151 out the back, M551 Sheridan out the back of the aircraft. Well, in this particular case, I was a witness. It got stuck, okay, and never left the aircraft. And so the aircraft pulled pitch at the end of the extraction zone and went straight up in the air, and this thing fell out, M551 Sheridan, light anti-tank, and it hit a bunch of pine trees at the end of the extraction zone, Sicily drop zone at Fort Bragg. And I happened to be there, so I was a captain, and they said, okay, Monaco, you got to do a 15-6 investigation. And by the way, you have to determine that it's going to be economically repairable. So I got up in an OH-58 and circled the thing. It was destroyed. I mean, there was nothing repairable about this. I went to my boss. I said, look, I can't claim this was economically repairable. It's destroyed. And he said, okay, we'll get somebody else to do it. But that's the way it was.
Sure.
It was crazy.
Holy
the motto
cow.
of my class is serve with integrity. I couldn't tell them it was repairable. It wasn't repairable.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. How'd you do physically at the academy with, like the IOCT and things like that?
I passed all of that stuff. I had trouble with the, there was an event where you had to hit a pommel horse and go over like that.
Right.
And I barely, the guy's name was Colonel Plummer, Colonel Plummer, and I never made it past that, but I did all right in everything else, boxing, wrestling, all that stuff. I was light, and so I didn't really have any major competition in those events, but I had trouble in gymnastics, a lot of trouble in gymnastics.
Okay. All right. Among some of the extracurricular activities you were involved in,
Right.
You helped out with the Pointer.
Right.
You did the Fine Arts Forum. You were an acolyte at the church.
Right.
And Math Forum. Tell me about some of those experiences.
Well, I was the head acolyte, okay, in senior year at West Point, and I got to know Father McCormick, Monsignor McCormick, and he was a good friend of mine. And also, I was just up at the Catholic Chapel just now. We're getting ready to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to know if they'd do a renewal of wedding vows. And I talked to the lady up there, Nancy. She was very nice, and I saw the garage that was up there. There's a 3-car garage right next to the chapel. Well, when I was a firstie, okay, we got our cars in March, okay, the beginning of March, and the 29th of March, 1970, there was a tremendous snowstorm, okay, and I was home on leave in Connecticut, and true story, home on leave in Connecticut like my classmates were because we just got our cars, and I had a 1970 Corvette, beautiful car. Anyways, it doesn't do well in snow, so I was driving back from Connecticut and to West Point, and I left at, it was Easter Sunday, the 29th of March, 1970. And driving back from West Point, from Connecticut to West Point, and I got in really late, and I ended up at the Catholic Chapel, and I knocked on the door, and there was a guy there named Father O'Brien at the time, Father Edward O'Brien. Monsignor later became chaplain in the United States Army, or United States military, and he let me park my car in the garage. So I parked my Corvette in his garage, garage for one night. He let me do it for one night. I had to get it out there the next day. True story. True story. But anyways,
Well,
I don't know
good.
if you want to put that in there or not. But I probably would have gotten in big trouble. But
Sure, sure.
But I couldn't get up the hill with the car. The positive traction rear axle did not work very well at West Point.
Okay. And so how was it at the Catholic chapel?
Oh, it was. We went to daily mass, and as a plebe, I went to daily mass in the morning so we could have breakfast. Okay, because you could get there late, and there weren't any upperclassmen around, so you go early, so you could eat a little bit more at breakfast. And so, but I did go to mass in the morning at plebe year, and then I went a lot during the rest of the time and ran the acolytes. We had to schedule the acolytes. You had to do it with paper and pencil back then. There was no computerized system to schedule who was going to be serving who. And I remember the Sunday masses very well, with all the dignitaries sitting in the front of the chapel. And it was just a great experience. And that's why the best experience I had at the Catholic chapel was when I was an instructor. And I came back, this would have been in 96 or 95. It was Christmas Eve. And I was stationed here. I was up at Lusk, and we went to chapel. And with my two sons that were cadets, and they were in uniform. I was in uniform. It was Christmas Eve, and we were the only ones in uniform in the whole Catholic chapel that night. And this is Christmas Eve because everybody went on leave. But we lived there, so so we were there. And that was my fondest memory of the chapel.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a good memory.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, during your time at West Point, the Vietnam War was in full swing.
Right.
How did you experience the war at West Point?
We had briefings about it and the history, but I wasn't very good in the history of military art, for one thing, because I was busy working on this program for my senior design project. But I made it through, and they had classes about the Vietnam War, and they had seminars in Thayer Hall, okay, where you go in and they tell you what's going on. And a lot of my classmates, participated in those seminars. I went to a few of them, not all of them, but it was just discussions. And I wasn't really worried because I knew the 82nd was in Vietnam, but the brigade that I got assigned to, and I had nothing to do with that, that was just the luck of the draw, I guess, I got assigned to was not there.
Right.
So I ended up in the brigade that was dealing with other things.
Did any of your professors talk about their experiences in the war?
Not really. I don't remember that happening.
Okay.
Actually, they were stuck to a program, to the curriculum.
Sure. And how about announcements off the poop deck? You remember hearing about
I remember
other
about
graduates getting killed?
Yes. Okay. And especially people in my company. I was in company B4 for 4 years, and I remember some of the first classmen that I really had to research. One of them was our company commander, a guy by the name of Rick Mason, and he got killed, and he was a good guy. There were a lot of good guys from my company that got killed, unfortunately, and it was very sad. I visited them at the West Point Cemetery, and all, but it was a sad time. Sad time.
Now, do you remember any interactions with civilians when you went off post during the Vietnam War?
Yeah, I remember going to some parties when I was on leave. Okay, and everybody was drinking and smoking stuff and all that, and I said, look, I can't be doing this. I'm a cadet, and I got to graduate. And but it was a wild time. Wild time. The 60s music is still my favorite music. I still listen to it all the time on Sirius XM. 60s music, great music, and some 70s, but mostly 60s music. But I remember dealing with civilians and them being really upset when people came home from Vietnam, baby killers and all this other stuff. It really aggravated me, and a lot of my classmates felt the same way.
Now, you mentioned a couple times your senior design project.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about what that was about.
Okay, well, the computer at the end of the hallway here in Thayer Hall was a GE 635 mainframe computer. And it uses things. Let me show you here. These are called IBM punch cards. Okay, IBM punch cards.
Okay.
And anyways, we would sit down behind a key punch machine, and I sent you a picture of me behind the key punch machine. Punch out the deck of cards, and then I put it in a box, and you had to have a green card at the beginning, okay, a yellow card in the middle, and separate the data from the program, and then a red card at the end after the data. And so you carry this deck of cards around, and you actually went in the computer room and put it in the machine, and it would read the cards. then you come back a day or two later and you get the results, okay? That's how it was back then in 1970.
And how many cards would...
Well, this was a box of cards this big.
Okay.
I was writing a macro assembler for the GE 635, which meant it would translate, small commands into adds and subtracts and multiply and divides. That's how primitive this was, okay? But it would take the actual machine language that the computer needed to actually do that add, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and translate it into something that could be executed, and then you get the result. So that took all semester to do that, all second semester, first year. I didn't go home very much second semester, first year. I was busy with that project. It was a big project.
Okay.
But that got me convinced that, yeah, this is tough, but I see a future here. Things are going to get better. And we started getting the teletype machines back then, where you could sit down and type on the teletype machine and interact with the mainframe. So that started coming into play. And of course, when I came back as an instructor in the 80s, we started getting microcomputers, and I taught on a microcomputer. And then we came back in the 90s, we started getting the internet, and things just get better and better. And now I walk around with a phone that's got the whole Thayer Hall and about 5 other Thayer Halls computer systems on the phone. More than that, a lot more. It's really amazing. There's two things I like about computers. One of them is Moore's Law. Okay, Moore's Law is a concept that was found by the guy that ran Intel in the 1960s. And he said that the speed of silicon will double every 18 months, but the price will remain the same. And that has held through basically until just recently, when it started to hit a wall where it can't get any faster or any cheaper. So, that's why we could have, if Moore's Law is applied to an automobile, you'd be going around with an automobile that could, go 300 miles an hour and cost 30 cents. But that's not the way it is with automobiles. But that's the way it is with computers. That's why you can walk around with a cell phone that's got all this capability, in the year 2021 that, you can only dream about in the year 1970.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's what got me excited about it later on. And I ended up going back, and I'm teaching online now for a couple universities in cybersecurity, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. And then you chose to branch field artillery.
Field artillery, yes, I did.
Why'd you pick field artillery?
Well, I didn't want to go infantry, and because of I really didn't have a good reason why I picked field artillery. I was in a zone for it. And a lot of my classmates were going field artillery. Some of my buddies were. So I didn't want to go infantry. I know that. I didn't want to be, wet and cold and all that all the time. I had gone to the courses out at Buckner, and it was okay, but I'd rather...
Sure.
Enough of the Boy Scout stuff, so I didn't want to do it. So I wanted to get with guns and jump out of airplanes and stuff. So I picked the 82nd and 105 batteries, and that's why I went field artillery. But then after I went to graduate school in 1978, Georgia Tech, Colonel Galloway was the head of the GNCS department. He called me up and said, look, you want to come back and teach here? And I said, yeah. So I went back and got a degree from Georgia Tech in computer science right at the right time, 1978. I mean, I got promoted to full colonel, and without commanding a battalion, without commanding a brigade. It was because of the computer stuff that I was involved with. Really a miracle, if you think about it back then, how tough it was to get promoted to 06. But that's what happened. I mean, I was just at the right place at the right time with the right skill set.
Sure. Okay. What was your graduation like?
Well, graduation was wonderful because we had a lot of family members from Connecticut that were there, and I got a picture of my whole family being at the graduation. It was at Mikey Stadium, and the 3rd of June. We had a big party when we got home. I remember walking up to the lot to get my car, and I still have the tube that my diploma came in. Still have that tube. And I have a room at my house now. I don't know if I sent you a picture. It's called the Academy Room. And all the stuff from my 2 sons that graduated from here. My son that graduated from the Air Force, we call it the Academy Room. But it's got all this memorabilia. It's like a museum in this room. My wife says she doesn't want to clean it because it's just too much stuff, too dusty.
Sure.
But it's sitting there. And it's right when you walk in the house. It's an extra room we have in the house. So we got a lot of stuff from West Point.
And you met your wife, Paulette, on graduation leave, right?
Yes. 2
How'd you
weeks
meet
after
her?
graduation. Back in the old days, the way you met people wasn't online. It wasn't, with the dating services and all that. You actually went in someplace and asked somebody to dance. At least that's what I remember. And I went to a place on Route 34 in Connecticut called the Actors Colony Inn. Okay, and I went into this place with a friend of my brother's actually, and there was nothing really going on at the Actors Colony Inn, thank God. So we went to another place on Route 34 in West Haven, where I went to high school, close to where I went to high school. And I met this young lady there, asked her to dance, and then we ended up getting engaged on Christmas Eve at a mass up at my hometown. I gave her the ring there. She couldn't say no because there are people in the pew there watching. And we got married the following October 1971. Her name is Paulette Monaco. She's been a bedrock. We raised our 4 sons, and she's done a wonderful job. So yeah, I'm proud of her.
Excellent.
She was a local Bridgeport, Connecticut gal. So she just happened to be at the right place at the right time that night, and I was too.
Yep. Tell me about your Army experiences. Were you sent to the basic course right away?
Yeah, here's what happened. I went out to jump school, okay,
right.
And I crashed and burned in my first jump in jump school, broke my ankle. This was in geez, it would have been July, August. Would have been August of 1970. So they shipped me out to Fort Sill to the basic course. I went out to the basic course, spent my 2 or 3 months out there, and came back to Fort Benning in December and made my last 4 jumps. And then I got stuck with Winter Ranger, which was not a good thing. But anyways, we started Winter Ranger in January and February of 1971, and graduated on 11th of March. And it was tough. It was cold. The reason why I made it through Ranger School is that I had learned how to do fire planning at the basic course. And the contemporaries in Ranger class did not know how to do fire planning, but I did. So I helped them how to do fire planning on all the patrols and all of that stuff. It's the only way I got through that. I certainly could not navigate my way there and or do any of that stuff that Rangers do. Yeah. But I was a good fire planner, and I helped them do that. And that's how I graduated.
Sure.
The guy who graduated, by the way, the captain who was in charge of our Ranger class was a guy named Lee Manning. You may know him. He's an author. And a famous author, Captain Lee Manning, has written a bunch of books on Vietnam, and he was about 7 feet tall, 6'7" or something. And in the Ranger picture, I'm standing right behind him. You can't really see me because he's so tall, but he's a very famous guy now, an author.
Okay.
Yeah.
And had your ankle healed up enough by then?
Yeah. I made the last 4 jumps. Yeah, what happened was, it was like, you want to do the parachute landing fall, and I ended up becoming a master blaster and jumping out with this 82nd Sports Parachute Club. I liked jumping, but it's just that I had a problem with my first jump.
Okay.
But it's like, you learn from your mistakes.
What happened? Was it a bad PLF? Or?
Yeah, it was like I was reaching for the ground, with my left foot, and you got to reach with both foot, and you got to bend your knees and all that. I wasn't ready to hit the ground, but I was ready after that. And then we started jumping with T10s. We were jumping with T10s, but then we started jumping with MC1-1s, which are steerable. Okay. And so you could pull the toggle down and go to the left or go into the wind at the last second, and that helped a lot in later days of the 82nd. I had 2 tours with the 82nd, one from 71 to 73,
right,
and one from 75 to 78.
Both the same battalion, right? 1st Battalion of the 320th?
Yes.
Okay.
And AOT was with that same battalion.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Excellent. Yeah. And so, well, let's talk about that. You were 1st Battalion, 1st Battalion of the 320th.
Right.
82nd Airborne.
Right.
And you said you were using 105 millimeter howitzers?
Yeah, M102s, yeah. And we would, I was XO, forward observer, XO, and battery commander in the 82nd when I was a captain. And then I came back and, when I came back, that's when I was the battery commander, not when I was a lieutenant. I was a FO and a FDO and, all the basic artillery positions to include XO.
Okay.
And I remember there were a bunch of classmates that were there with us, so it was great being there at the 82nd.
Sure. What did you learn about leadership as a young lieutenant?
Yep. NCOs, okay. West Point at the time really didn't stress how important NCOs were, and especially first sergeants and platoon sergeants and people like that, and how expert they were. So I learned a lot about listening to NCOs. When I was a battery commander, we had a first sergeant. It was a combat veteran. His name was not Sergeant Jackson, but Brooks, First Sergeant Brooks, and he was unbelievable. He said, "Sir, this is my office here, okay?" And he was the first sergeant's office. "That's your office, okay? You don't mess with my stuff. I don't mess with your stuff." And he told me where the line was, which nobody ever told me that before. So I learned a lot from this guy, okay? And I remember commanding Alpha Battery, the 1st 320, was easy because he was the first sergeant. Then I went to Headquarters and Service Battery, commanded that for a year. That was a lot. That was a challenge and a half. Okay, this was 1977, 78, my second tour there. Headquarters and Service Battery has all these ash and trash outfits like survey and all this other stuff that camo, and it was very difficult to keep control of it. I remember one afternoon, two soldiers came into my office and said, "Sir, we didn't get paid." And I said, "I think you guys were AWOL all month, right? And let me check on that." And I said, "First Sergeant, could you check to see if these guys were AWOL last month?" And they were AWOL, but they wanted to get paid. He said, "Just a minute, let me call a finance officer." So we called the MPs and had them arrested. But that's stuff that went on there. It was crazy. Crazy stuff that was going on.
Okay.
They were all AWOL for a month and they wanted to get paid.
And you say you were also on call for race riots?
Yes, that was in the early days, the early 70s, yeah. Race riots, and we deployed a couple times. They taught us how to use the batons and keep people at bay and all. It was sad, very sad.
Okay.
It's sad to see that still going on now, but it is.
All right. And how often did you get a chance to fire your artillery?
Oh, we went out on FDXs all the time. Yeah, and what would happen is we would drop out of the back of the aircraft. They would heavy drop the M102 howitzers, and then they would time us. Okay, from the time the last aircraft dropped the howitzer to the time you were safe and ready to fire on a drop zone. That was the RTEP, the Army Training Test, and we fired usually every couple months. And we jumped every 3 months. You had to jump every 3 months to retain your proficiency. But the heavy drops were exciting things to watch because, you know, every now and then a chute would not open and one of the howitzers would crash in. And we had gamma goats back then. Gamma goats,
oh, yeah.
M561s.
Yeah, how were those? I hear those were a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. They had an articulating mechanism, so the front of the gamma goat could be facing down the hill, and the back of it could be like this. That's how they bent in the middle. A crazy vehicle, but they pulled the howitzers pretty well, you know.
Okay.
And they could go through water, a little bit of water.
How many jumps do you have?
I got 68 military jumps and about 250 skydives. Skydiving was a little bit different because that was on the weekends. And we did it out of helicopters, and you know, I had a couple tailgates out of Chinooks and out of a C-130 during a thing called Leap Fest at Fort Bragg, where they would have a bunch of skydivers come out. I was on a team with a bunch of people, and back then I was a para-commander, and then I got a Stratostar, which was a square parachute. I didn't do it at West Point, but I started when I got to the 82nd after going through jump school. And it's so much nicer because you don't have to worry about the static line, and you got the free fall, and you fall from 7,500 feet, 30 seconds to 2,500 feet, and pull your ripcord. Nowadays, when you first jump with free fall, you go with somebody. You're attached to another jumper, okay, a professional jumper. But in the days when I went through it, when you started off, you were not attached. You had a static line, the first 3 or 4 jumps, and you had to come in and they got to see you pull the ripcord, the dummy ripcord. It wasn't a real ripcord, it was a dummy ripcord. And once you did it 3 times, they let you free fall. So we did that. I really enjoyed skydiving. My family would come out. We had a van, so we parked it out at Sicily Drop Zone, St. Mariglees Drop Zone at Fort Bragg. And my son back then, my son Frank, he was born at Fort Bragg. I always knew he would be an airborne soldier someday. I actually went back in 1994, the year that you graduated. There was a guy here, now a general officer, I forgot his name, but he was the operations officer for West Point G3. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. But anyways, he got me a permission to go down and jump with my son on his 5th jump at jump school.
Okay.
So I was a full colonel. I showed up there, and the black cat said, "Oh, we're gonna have fun with you, sir." I hadn't jumped in 16 years.
Oh, wow.
And so they put me through the paces, static line paces, and I had to go through 1 week of training before I could jump with him on Friday.
Kind of a refresher?
A refresher, that's right.
Okay.
And they raised hell with me. It was hilarious. But anyways, I made a jump with him, and I'll never forget the look on his face because I was standing in the door. They made me go out first, and he was right behind me. And he looked at me like, "Are you really going to do this, Dad?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." And so I went out. Well, I had an MC-1-1. He had a T-10, so I wasn't worried. But he was worried. He was very worried. The other thing that's funny happened when having a cadet here while you were assigned to faculty was that his name was Francis Monaco, okay? And email was just starting, and Lieutenant General Graves had a habit of sending emails to him instead of to me. Okay, so he was getting my emails, and he told me about that, and I talked to General Graves about it. That was hilarious, but stuff that he wanted me to do, he was telling my son to do it. That was hilarious.
Okay.
There was another guy. Okay, there's a guy, General Carpenter, the Lonesome End.
Right.
Okay, he was one of my commanders at Fort Drum when I first got to Fort Drum, and I was assigned as the Division Automation Management Officer when I first got there in 1986. And Carpenter, I went into General Carpenter's office, and he said to me, "Monaco, I don't know anything about these computers. I don't want to know anything about these computers. Just tell me when it's all done." I had a field system called a Tactical Army Combat Service Support Computer, TACS, T-A-C-C-S. I'm sure it's no longer being used. So I didn't see him or hear from him for 2 years until the thing was fielded. Then I get this nice handwritten letter from him saying, "Good job, well done, I'm glad it's over with." That's the only time I heard from the general. So he wasn't my raider or anything. He was just, he was a CG, and I was the Division Automation Management Officer. I worked for the DISCOM actually, but it was hilarious. And he didn't want to know anything about it. And then I got another general named Boylan. General Boylan was also here at West Point, and he knew more about computers than I did. He was really up to speed on them. And I'd be in his office telling him how to do this, or he'd be telling me how to do something almost every other day.
He was the commandant then, right?
Yeah, he was the commandant, yeah. Yeah, General Boylan, he was something else.
Okay. So you married Paulette in October of 71.
I married her in October 71.
Right?
Yeah, yes.
Here at the academy,
yes,
correct?
at the Holy Trinity Catholic Chapel. And
how was that?
Oh, that was wonderful. Yeah, my father hired a bus and put everybody on a bus so they wouldn't have to get arrested for driving under the influence coming home from the wedding. And so they drove everybody up to the wedding, and we took off, and Paulette had a 65 Ford Mustang convertible.
Wow.
I left my Corvette down at Fort Bragg. I didn't want to bring it up here. So we drove down after the wedding, which is a chapel, and it was Monsignor McCormick married us. And I had some of my buddies from Fort Bragg come up to be the best, to be the part of the wedding party. And she had all her friends from Connecticut. And then we went on a honeymoon to Nassau after that. I drove back down to Fort Bragg, and we got on a plane in Raleigh-Durham and flew down to Nassau. And we've been married ever since, 50 years. 50 years this October, if all goes well, if we make it.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, and then after that, you were in Korea for a year.
1 year.
73 to 74. What did you do in Korea?
Okay, I was what they call an emergency action officer, and I was assigned to the DMZ. I was going up to the DMZ on orders for the 2nd Infantry Division, all set to go up there. But what happened was one of my former XOs when I was in the 82nd was working with the G1 or S1 or whatever it was of the 8th Army, and he saw my name on the roster, and he said, "Monaco, you're going to be. I need somebody up here in Seoul to be an emergency action officer." So I left my wife. I got her all set up in an apartment in Connecticut, and got her all set up. And I went over to. We had one child at the time. I went overseas to Korea. Got there, and my orders were changed, and I was stationed in Seoul. So I had to get a place to live in Seoul. So we got an apartment. I got an apartment, and then I sent for her, and I said, "Look, come on over. Be non-command sponsored, but you could still come over." And that's why all my 27 years in uniform, we were never separated more than 3 months. It took her 3 months to get a passport and to come over. And so she came over with my son, and we spent a year. My emergency action officer duties were I carried a .45 pistol, and it had an M16, and the sergeant had an M16 and a .45 pistol, and we had a safe with the nuclear access codes in it, okay, for releasing the weapons. And I was supposed to shoot him. He was supposed to shoot me if we went into the safe by ourselves. But if we got the command to go in and get the release codes, then we both went in, we both turned the things at the same time and opened the safe up. Just like in the movies, that's exactly how it was. And I spent a year there. A couple funny things happened while I was in that assignment. One of them was they did Operation Greenback. And they used to have these things called Military Payment Certificates, MPCs, which was all over Korea at the time, South Korea. And these things were just used by the military at the PX or anything you had to do with money, not American dollars. They weren't American dollars. So at a certain time and a certain date, they did this Operation Greenback where you had like 48 hours to turn in all the NPCs
Right.
and turn them into greenbacks, and then they'd be no good anymore. Okay.
So to try to eliminate counterfeiting.
That's right. All the stuff downtown, the ladies of the night and all that had all these NPCs, and people were throwing bags of that over the wall trying to get us to convert it to greenbacks. I had to make that call for 8th Army that night. I remember getting the call from the general, and that was a funny thing. Another thing that happened while we were over there, it was like being a duty officer for 8th Army. I did that for a year, and then we had an alternate site. But there was a battery that was coming in to fire a salute for a retired general or somebody who had passed away, I forget. Anyways, it got lost by the Korean equivalent of our White House. And so it was a 105 battery sitting out in front of the Korean Blue House, okay, in the middle of the day, and all hell broke loose. They thought it was going to attack. They didn't know what this gun battery was doing out in front of the Blue House. It got lost. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And so I had to get that call, and we had to apologize and all of that. Kind of funny. Nobody got hurt. No, thank God. It was exciting. Then I finally got home and went back to
back to Bragg.
back to state. Yeah, back to Fort Sill for the advanced course, and then to Bragg.
How did your wife like Korea?
It was kind of a weird assignment for us because we were there and living in a Korean apartment, okay, with Korean people, and and we had a baby, so we were raising a baby. He was only a couple months old when we went over there, and but we did all right. We shopped at the commissary. It was not command sponsored, so we had we got medical care and a as needed basis. It wasn't anything definite, but we did all right. It was okay. It was worth it bringing her over. I had to pay for it and all that, but
Sure.
It was worth it.
And the infant was
Francis.
Now
Son Frank.
is Frank a junior or?
Actually, I named him Francis Joseph. Okay, I'm Francis
Okay.
John, so he's technically a junior, but we don't call him junior.
Okay, all right. And so now you're back at Bragg, and you're
Right.
there from 75 to 78.
Yes, sir.
And you started out as a fire support officer.
Fire support officer.
And then you commanded two companies, Alpha Company and then headquarters and service.
Two batteries.
Two
okay,
batteries,
right.
yeah. And so how was that experience?
Well, the commanding was wonderful because I took over from a good guy named Joseph Lee, and the first sergeant was First Sergeant Brooks, and Alpha, first of the 320, was a squared away unit. We won Bass Battery a couple times, and just a very, very strict unit, strict, tough, and everything I could ever want being a leader there. And then my battalion commander was a guy named Frank Rausch. I think he's class of 58.
Okay.
And he said, I need somebody to command headquarters and service battery. And so after 1 year, I commanded that for a year, and that was a little more challenging, to say the least. Headquarters and service battery, a little challenging. So, but it was still worthwhile because there were so many different things going on, and you had to be a part of it all.
Right.
Well, I enjoyed command.
Had anything else changed at Bragg while you were gone?
Well, the Vietnam War had wound down, okay,
Right.
and we were now trying to get money to pay for jumps and things like that. And it was very important when you went on an airborne operation that you actually jumped, because as far as the Air Force was concerned, because if you didn't jump, the Air Force had to pay for the aircraft, okay? And I found that out. My son Joe told me that later on. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, but he said that's why they want to actually have the jump going. And so the wind velocity on the ground, for the stop a jump, it's very critical. If it's up too high. We had a classmate that got killed in Ranger School because the wind was too high on the ground. He was a sports parachute jumper, Ken Gillihan. But anyways, that's the only thing that I can remember changing. Money was tight. It was hard to get stuff.
And that was the post-Vietnam era.
Post-Vietnam era, yeah. The drawdown, people getting riffed, okay, because of there wasn't a lot of slots open. Yeah.
Okay.
Some of my classmates got riffed. Yeah. Sad.
Now, in 1980, you earned a master's degree at Georgia Tech.
Right.
Before coming back to the academy to teach, and you taught from 80 to 83.
Yes, sir.
And how was Georgia Tech for you?
It was an experience going back. The first year I had to take refresher courses and all the basic stuff, okay? But the second year I got to take some electives that I had really no experience with, some computer science courses. And there was a guy named Philip Enslow. He was a grad, and he helped me a lot, and another guy named Pete Jensen. And they told me, they said, Monaco, if you really want to learn about computers, why don't you go to Heathkit and build one? And so I sent away for a kit a Heathkit HT11, which was a LSI 11 based system. And back then, it was a 16-bit computer. It ran UCSD Pascal. That's where I learned about that stuff. And I built the kit, and that was my full-time job, basically. And he gave me credit for it, for graduate credit. And I learned more from doing that than I did for the 2 years being at Georgia Tech. Building a computer, what makes it tick, what are storage options, main memory, the operating systems that we were using, UCSD Pascal and RT11. So that really got me going. And that's when I wrote FMT, and that's what we used at West Point for 3 years, a small text formatter.
Okay.
I tried to find a manual for it, but I couldn't find a manual.
Okay. And so you returned to West Point, and back then it was the Department of Geography and Computer Science.
Right.
How did computers end up in geography?
Good question.
Was that Colonel Kirby's doing?
Yes. Yeah. Geography and computer science, and he fought, as I recall, to keep it out of the EECS area, because.
So there was electrical engineering at the same time.
There was.
Okay.
And actually, it belongs in electrical engineering. Now as I look back on it, but that's where it is now. I think that's where it is now, right?
Right.
Yeah. But anyways, Colonel Kirby was big on interactive graphic design in the lab, and we had a lab with a thing called a VAX 11780. Okay, the VAX 11780 was this was 1981, 82 time frame. It was a mini computer, not a microcomputer, a mini computer, and it was on the 5th floor of Washington Hall, and it had two 300 megabyte disk drives, which was huge for back then, huge, and they were big like a washing machine. They were as big as a washing machine, 300 meg, and I remember I was given a tour of the lab to some VIPs. Came in, and one of the VIPs leaned up against one of the drives and accidentally powered it down. And I didn't know it was powered down until cadets started knocking on the door and saying, "There's something wrong with the system." And it was the thing had powered off because the guy had leaned up against it. It was hilarious. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we fixed that. Those were the early days of computers at West Point, the early 80s.
What's the difference? Because you've mentioned microcomputers.
Right.
And you mentioned a mini computer.
Yeah,
what's the difference?
Yeah, probably there's no more mini computers, but mini computer was a small mainframe, basically. Mm-hmm. Okay, they could do stuff that a mainframe could do, but took up half the space. VAX, the DEC VAX 11780 was the key mini computer. So it was a small mainframe, basically. Microcomputer, something could fit on your desk. Okay. The whole CPU and everything is something like your Mac, your iMacs there. By the way, I'm a Mac person now. Okay, excellent. Yeah. All right,
while you were here, right when you came back, the first class, including women, graduated from West Point.
Right, 1980.
Right, and did you have any women in your classes while you were teaching here?
Yes, okay, we did. And what was really funny about it was the cadets didn't seem to, there was no difference. I was amazed, okay, that they adopted so well. I don't know how I would have done if there were women here when I was a cadet, but the cadets that were there then in the late 70s, okay, when the women started coming, they had no problems with it, and I didn't either, okay. The faculty didn't either, okay. It was just if they could do the job, they did the job, you know, and they did. They were good students. I still correspond with some. We sponsored 3 classmates from the class of '83. Not the superintendent, he was the class of '83, but 3 other of his classmates we sponsored and had them up to the house. We used to live on Connor Road back then, and we lived up in Lusk when I came back the second time. Okay. I came back the second time. I was up at Fort Drum, and I put my retirement papers in, and this was 1996. No, it was 1991, 92. I had my 20 years in, and I just got promoted to colonel. I was getting ready to get promoted. I was on the colonel's list. And anyways, General Galloway said, "Come back here. We need somebody to take over as the deputy or the assistant dean for academic computing." And apparently the person they had selected for the job turned it down at the last minute, so they needed somebody. So we packed up and came down here from Fort Drum and got here in '92. And my son was starting as a plebe in '92, so it's kind of unique, my son Frank. And my other boys went to O'Neill High School and in the local grammar school. Sure. At that point. Okay. But it was great being back here. And we lived in Lee area for the first year, and then we moved up to Lusk, and that was the best. Lived right down the street from the coach, from the football coach, Bob Sutton.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, in '84, you attended the Command and General Staff College,
Right.
and you followed that with an assignment to Headquarters Allied Land Forces Southeastern Europe from '84 to '86.
Yeah.
What was that assignment like?
That was Turkey, Izmir, Turkey.
Right.
And I was their IT guy. They needed IT people because they were Stone Ages. I mean, really Stone Ages. They 300 bits per second was lightning fast for them. But anyways, I got there and I didn't know what to expect. But we lived on economy there. And my wife said, I don't care where we live as long as it's close to a hospital or some kind of clinic.
Sure.
So we got a place right next to the clinic, downtown Izmir. Beautiful, beautiful weather. The weather was fantastic. I ran almost every day and did a lot of exercise in there. But my job was really kind of a Stone Age. Okay, they had like 7 or 8 sites around the country. NATO, they were NATO sites, and my job was to keep them all linked up together. Mm-hmm. And I worked with Turkish personnel, and there was a couple Americans there, but it was a fun job. There was an alternate site too, in case somebody something happened to the primary site, like Korea. But the alternate site was up on top of a hill, and Disco Hit was the name of it. And one time, a bunch of squirrels ate through the fiber optic cable up there, and the site was down. Things like that happened in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we enjoyed Turkey. There was fresh fruits and vegetables all the time. We got there, our apartment cost us $900 a month when we first got there, US, 900 US, but we paid in Turkish lira. By the time we left in '86, we were paying $200 for the same apartment because the value of the dollar, went up so much. Reagan was the president.
Okay.
And the scariest thing that happened there was in the middle of that. My wife was in the commissary shopping, and they said that we had bombed Libya or something. I think in the '80s, and they had everybody out. So she had to get on a horse and carriage to get home. They put all the goods in the horse. She couldn't check out, so she just got on there with the kids and went home.
Wow. Okay. After that assignment in '86, you earned a Master's of Public Administration.
Yeah, while I was in Turkey. Yeah.
From Troy State.
Yeah, I was bored out of my mind actually most of the time. So I taught a little bit there for University of Maryland, University College. I taught on weekends. And it was kind of fun. With dependents, usually military dependents would come in, and I taught them word processing and spreadsheets. VisiCalc was the name of the spreadsheet, and then WordPerfect, things like that. On microcomputers, they had a lab set up there. And actually, when I retired from the Army, and when I retired from PACE in '97, they asked me if I wanted to continue teaching for them online. So that's what I'm doing now. Okay. University of Maryland, University College.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then you became the Automations and Data Processing Officer at the 10th Mountain Division.
10th Mountain Division.
From '86 to '90.
Right.
And how was that experience?
Well, that was the one where the Tactical Army Combat Service Support System was being fielded. I worked in a DISCOM, and so this was a system to take care of all the supplies for the division, for the DISCOM. And it was, we went to the field, and it was cold, 10th Mountain Division, Fort Drum, and it was newly activated, so there was no, I guess the last time it was activated during World War II. This was a newly activated division when General Carpenter was there, and so everything was new. They were putting in fiber optic lines, getting the post reconfigured. The nice thing about Fort Drum back then was that each one of the facilities, each one of the battalions, each one of the companies, each one of the batteries was exactly the same. So they got to design it from the ground up. Mm-hmm. So the batteries, if you went to one battery in one battalion, it would be the same location in the other battalion. Everything was duplicated. And we got to put infrastructure in the ground right from the beginning. New facilities, new PX and all that. The schools weren't that bad in Watertown, but it was a good assignment. We enjoyed it, and not a lot of crime up there because it was so cold.
So that had to be a dream come true to be able to build the infrastructure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I actually at the end I put in my retirement papers again. Okay, and then the CG there said, Monaco, you want to take over as the ISE commander for Fort Drum? I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And so I did that, and I ended up going after the 2 years as the ISE commander. My motto was informing the mountain, and we talked about Moore's Law, and we talked about a thing called, what was it that we call, Take the Message to Garcia. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Take the Message to Garcia, which was General Boylan taught me that. General Boylan. And so I ended up getting that idea, Take the Message to Garcia, which you give an award, or Garcia was somebody that was carrying a message to some general during the Spanish-American War. And, without saying how am I going to get paid, how I'm going to get there, how long is it going to take, and that kind of stuff. Just did the mission. And so when I got to Fort Drum as a commander there, we implemented that, and I gave awards out, and I actually have coins and stuff that I gave out to people. And then I took that to Pace, and when I got to be the CIO at Pace University, I gave out coins and did the Message to Garcia Award. It's still going on there as far as I know. Kind of funny.
That's pretty good.
Try to get people to be proactive in what they do.
Okay, and what sort of automation was available at the time within the division? Because this had to be very early in developing automation.
Right,
for the big Army.
This was in the 10th Mountain Division you're talking about, right? 10th
Right.
Mountain Division. Yeah, when we got there in 1986, okay, there were some microcomputers floating around, okay, but there wasn't any central email system or anything like that yet. Okay, that didn't happen till the 90s. It was crude. The Tactical Army Service Support System was a gigantic tactical box, okay, that they carried around, and all I could do was count supplies, basically. That's all it did. And it was networked by cable. You had to actually run WD1 or whatever they used to go between them. Very rudimentary. Mm-hmm. But the ARPANET was a worldwide network of the military at the time, and we were just starting to get email addresses, okay, that you could send from one post to another post. But most of the stuff that I worked with while I was a DUM at Fort Drum was interpost. You could send somebody to the CG or send something to the deputy CG, but you couldn't go, to Army headquarters or anything like that yet. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen until the 90s.
Okay. So then your next assignment was 90 to 92. You were assigned to the Directorate of Information Management,
right,
and the commander of the U.S. Army Information System Command at West Point.
No, at Fort Drum.
Okay, at Fort Drum.
Right.
So from 90 to 92, you're still at Drum.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't leave there until 92, and then came to West Point in 92.
Okay, and so then in 92, you came to West Point.
That's right.
You were on the dean's staff.
Yeah, it was for 1 year. That's
for 1 year.
The person he wanted to be the assistant dean for academic computing, something happened to her. It was a lady, and she never showed up, and he needed somebody. So I filled in for 1 year with the Gold Coats, John Junod, and all of those people. And that's when the internet was born.
Okay, and then you did a year at the War College.
Oh, that was corresponding studies.
Okay, and then you stayed in the same position until you retired, right?
That's right.
In 97. So, how was automation changing? I mean, this is probably drastic change in automation at West Point.
The internet, by the way, just to show you how drastic it was, 91 to 93, I took the Army War College Correspondence Studies course, okay, where they send you all these papers, and you had to fill them all out and then mail them back, snail mail, okay? And I actually kept all that stuff. And I was on a Zoom just a few weeks ago with one of the cadet companies. Because they canceled my 50th reunion for the West Point class in 1970, we started Zooms. So we had 36 cadet companies, so 35 company POCs, which we appointed, are conducting Zooms. So anyways, one of the Zooms included a tactical officer from back when we were cadets. His name was Wallace, Terry Wallace. And he was in on a Zoom. And I said, that name is familiar. So I went back and looked at my corresponding studies course, and he was the one who graded all my papers.
Okay.
So I took a picture of it and sent it to him, and he said he couldn't believe that I kept the damn thing. But anyways, so the Army correspondence was 2 weeks residence, and the rest of it was written. And now, of course, it's all online. If you wanted to do it by correspondence, it's all done online. Mm-hmm. So that's how everything changed from 92 to 97. Google wasn't around in 92, but it started to be around in 93, 94, 95. Mm-hmm. The internet was not widespread back then, but it started to be. So we watched West Point USMA.edu website be born, okay? It wasn't around until then. And I helped the Gold Coats the best I could the first year I was there. And then as the ISC commander, we had to provide the infrastructure for it to all to work, along with the phones and all that other stuff. My biggest concern when I was there was Super Bowl Sunday, making sure that the television links to all the quarters worked. Okay, that was my biggest nightmare if something happened, because it was a very flaky system. But then we built a fiber optic network, and the superintendent at the time said, Monaco, I want you to go out there every day and check these guys. They were running a cable across diagonal walk, parallel and diagonal walk on a plane. And I had from the day after graduation to the day before our day to get it complete. And so I was out there every day checking these guys.
Was this General Palmer or General Graves?
General Graves, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so we went out there and checked it every day. I think I got the dates right, but it was and they put the fiber optic network in, and that changed everything. Once fiber was in, you almost have unlimited bandwidth if you got the right hardware at the end. You know, the right connectivity. But we watched it all happen, and USMA.edu, and now it's West Point, .edu. I think they changed the name of the domain. When I got the PACE, I don't know if you're ready to talk about that. I'll just talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
When I got the PACE, I got the PACE after retiring in 1997, and my biggest concern there was we had only one of everything. Okay, there wasn't a backup system, and we had like 20,000 students, and I was worried about if something went wrong. So we started building redundancy into the networks. I was the first chief information officer, and I had to combine the academic side of PACE computing with the administrative side, the admissions and all of that stuff with the grades and that. So what we did was we designed a system where there would be backups, and there'd be an alternate site in case something happened. And then what happened on September 11th,
Right.
So it happened. I was there as a CIO on September 11th. We had the 55th floor of building number 1, World Trade Center, was the Pace University World Trade Institute. It was one of my campuses, one of our campuses. And we were supposed to have a meeting at that site on September 11, 2001. At the last minute, some of the trustees could not get into the building because they didn't have the necessary access rights or clearances, to get in the building. So we moved it to Midtown Manhattan. So we were meeting in Midtown Manhattan on September 11th, 2001, and including Ivan Seidenberg, who was the CEO of Verizon. And after the destruction happened there, we were offline for about 2 days, and then I had to get everybody back online. It took about a week. We moved all of our equipment to an alternate site and came back up. We had people living right next to World Trade Center. They were campus dormitories for PACE. It was a sad time. But we got it done. About a week later, we came back online, and the lesson there is to have 2 of everything if you can.
Sure.
And have. There was a building next to the World Trade Center called 140 West Street, which was the Verizon Dial Central office, and everything on the East Coast went through that building, and we didn't know it until 9/11. But after 9/11, that building got destroyed or got impacted because everything flooded underneath it, and with all the water coming in. So after that, we did diverse routing. So we got sites, going north to here, south to here, all over the place now.
So on September 11th, you were in a meeting.
I was in a meeting,
Midtown
Manhattan. It was supposed to be downtown. Supposed to be there.
What do you remember about the terror attacks?
We didn't have a television there, so we were just hearing stuff secondhand. But I remember that the chief financial officer and Ivan Seidenberg, who was a board of trustee member, president of Verizon at the time, a PACE graduate, got on a car and drove downtown, and they were the last 2 people they allowed downtown. After that, nobody could get back downtown, and we had to wait. I remember going out about midnight on September 11th. I was still in Midtown Manhattan, and all I heard was Air Force jets flying overhead. Air Force jets. There was nobody there at Grand Central Station. It was empty, and I was trying to find a ride home, trying to get home for the night. And I knew that I had 3 sons that were on active duty at the time. My son Joe had just graduated, and my son Frank was already commissioned, and so was Michael. And I said, they're going to go see combat, and they did. They all saw combat after that.
During that day, after the planes hit the World Trade Center, were you able to see the smoke from where you were?
Oh, yeah.
And did you see the debris when everything?
No, we didn't see the stuff falling down. We just saw the smoke. Midtown Manhattan is, like 10 blocks, 20 blocks up.
Okay.
Actually, it's more than that. It's like 30 blocks up. But we ended up getting a television. We went down and bought a television from a local place and put it on, so we were watching it. Everybody that was on the staff, the president's staff. David Caputo was the president at the time. And it was a tough time for us,
Sure.
especially when we lost 4 students and at least 4 students and a bunch of people that were graduates that were in the World Trade Center at the time, Pace graduates. Pace is primarily a business school and down in the city.
Okay.
And we had a campus in Westchester. One of the things I did, I told you, I got there in '97. First thing I did, I said, look, we can't have all our stuff down in New York City. So we moved everything up to Westchester. Good thing we did. Okay. All our computers were in Briarcliff Manor campus, and that's where my office was. I didn't want to have to commute all the way down there every day. So we moved to Briarcliff. I live in Carmel right now. Carmel, New York, still live there. But it took us a while to get back to normal, but we got back to normal, thank God.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's back up just a little bit to your time at West Point.
Okay.
You mentioned the Gold Coats.
Gold Coats
already.
Yeah.
For the people who are watching this that don't know the Gold Coats, tell me a little bit about them.
Okay, these were enlisted personnel that were experts with computers in the early days, and I think they're still around. Okay, they wore gold jackets, and they were to help cadets that had computer problems. And one of the best Gold Coat that, at the time was a guy named John Janad, and he was the head Gold Coat, and I worked very closely with him. He ended up forming a company called Ipswich, okay, IPSWITCH, and that did software and Gmail, okay, the Gmail system right now. He implemented that for West Point, only for West Point at the time. I don't know if he sold it to Google or not, but it's the same name, Gmail. And these guys were very, very proficient, and their mission in life was to help people, you know, with computer programs, and if they had a problem getting something done that needed computer assistance, they were there. And they worked for the dean. They worked for the office of the dean, and they used to be down in the basement of Thayer Hall. I'm not sure where they're located now. Do you, you know where they are?
No, last I knew they were below where the cadet store is.
Oh, okay, okay.
For a while, they were also up in the building where Boodler's was.
Okay, okay. So, I'm going to check them out one of these days.
What was your greatest challenge to introducing computing and internet and all that to West Point?
I think it was the issue of privacy and people being concerned about their information being, you know, getting into the wrong hands. Even back then, you know, I remember not so much at West Point because, you know, you could tell somebody to do something. If you were a colonel, they'd listen to you usually, you know. And so that's the way it was here. But I know when I got to Pace, it was a different story. Okay, they didn't want to they didn't want to move to a new version of email. They didn't want to move to a new version of anything. Okay, because it's too much work for them to do it. But they ended up doing it. Okay, because that was it. We got away with the old stuff. We turned it off. And same thing happened at West Point. We started turning off the old email system and turned the new email system on. As a matter of fact, I have a plaque in my office at home right now that shows Colonel F.J. Monaco Blazing Trails, the wild email ride. And we went from 4 different email systems in the 90s, okay? We used to have Microsoft Mail, and then we went to Solaris Mail, and we went to some other mail. But anyways, it's a plaque, and it shows a horse riding across from a... So the one thing about computers, Moore's Law. It keeps changing everything, makes things faster, and it stays the same price. And so it's going to change, and change is good when it comes to automation. I learned that as a 53 a long time ago. Okay.
What was your greatest success here at West Point in terms of automation and computing?
I think seeing the cadets that I taught when I was here in the 80s, being back on the staff and faculty, you know, later on, and some of them went on to careers like Rick Howard, Gene Wrestler, guys that I actually taught in class, okay, and they went on to do wonderful things in the Army with automation, and sometimes I get an email or something from the old people that I taught. My avocation in life has always been teaching, okay, and automation, but mostly teaching. And I still love doing it. Problem is, I'm Italian. I like to use my hands, okay?
Sure.
And you can't do that online too much unless you're doing it like this. So I think that teaching and seeing graduates come back and see what they did with their lives.
Okay, excellent. How did the infrastructure change here over your tenure?
Went from the Stone Ages to the 21st century. West Point was actually a leader in giving computers to students, okay, laptops, computers, and all of that. There's a history of computing at West Point, goes all the way back to Colonel Brocious and Colonel Patrick and all of those guys that had a vision that, you know, was going to be like this in the future. And the infrastructure paralleled that. once we put the fiber optic lines in the 90s, that opened the gateway to do anything we want to do. So fiber optics is the key. Now they're talking about 5G cell networks, okay, which will, and maybe satellite networks, okay, in the future, which will make it so you don't need any wires. But I don't think they're going to be able to get there anytime soon as far as duplicating what a fiber cable can do. So that's basically the infrastructure changed drastically once we put fiber optics in, connected all the barracks, CB LAN, and all of that.
Okay. During your time, how did computers change? For example, I know that when I came here in '90, the classes ahead of us needed a boot disk.
Right, right.
We didn't need a boot disk, but then a year or two after I left, then they're all of a sudden getting laptops.
Right.
So what sort of changes did you see?
Well, I saw the changes in the storage systems, okay, basically the storage systems. And I built the HT11 back in 1978, two 8-inch floppy disks, okay? And you had a boot from one floppy disk, and the other one had the data or a program on it. And then I went to a hard drive back then was $5,000 for 5 megabytes. 5 megabytes was $5,000. I couldn't afford it, so I had a boot off of floppies. So once the storage, they solved the storage problem and went to 3.5-inch floppy disks, and then they went to hard drives. That allowed them to load the whole operating system into the computer, and that's why they can go to a laptop, okay, instead of having a big bulky disk drives there. So now you don't even see a disk drive anymore. Nobody has disk drives. Everything's online in the cloud, okay? And so I think that the infrastructure changed and not only that, but the speed of the processor changed, doubled every 18 months, Moore's law. And once they even get the computing power on my iPhone or your Galaxy phone of what the old computer center used to have. I mean, the whole computer center is in your pocket now. And the infrastructure on the internet, okay, the way that the internet evolved, the different sites bringing up worldwide connectivity, even to the farthest outreach with satellites and with high frequency antennas and stuff like that. I mean, you could talk to just about anybody in the world instantaneously, you know. So the infrastructure of the speed of the transmission, the storage capability, and the speed of the processor, all of those factors combined to make it to what we're doing. We haven't seen anything yet. I mean, we haven't seen anything. It's going to be, I've always said that cable TV is on the way out. You're not going to have cable TV. It's all going to be internet streaming devices. It's getting there now, okay? And you're going to have, you're probably not going to have fiber much longer either. It's going to be wireless connectivity with 5G and networks like that, as long as they could prove them safe and efficient. So there's a lot to come. And satellite transmissions from people that live on the outskirts of town, where they don't want to run wires out there, or they want to put a cell tower, you'll get it from a satellite, and it'll be just as fast as having Wi-Fi in your house or having internet in your house. So we've just seen the beginning of it.
Okay. Excellent.
Just remember Moore's law. Moore's law.
Sure. What other changes did you see at the academy in your time here?
Well, there's lots going on now with the honor code and things like that. When I was a cadet, you know, you didn't have a second chance. If you were caught, that was the end. And but I think that things change. The kids change. I mean, I see there's women in the Corps now. I mean, these are all good things that happen, and I think that they'll continue to happen. And the superintendent is I think he's doing a great job. He's appointed, my class is in on this, Barney Forsythe. You interviewed him a few weeks ago.
Right.
And he was talking about a new guy that they're having on the staff that's going to be handling all these different issues that are coming up recently. Change is good. I mean, change is good. I just hope that the core values of the honor code and all stay the same, and I think they will.
Sure.
I'm confident. I love West Point. My wife and I love it, and the kids love it. So we're always going to come back here.
Now, you mentioned working for Dean Galloway.
Yes.
Which other deans did you work for?
I think he was it. Yeah.
How was it working for him?
Janarone was the dean when I was a cadet. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, General, but I didn't work for him. But I mean, General Galloway has always been a good partner. He promoted me to major and to colonel. Okay. Yeah, General Galloway. He was the only guy I think the only dean I worked for.
Okay. All right.
He was a good guy. He he let me do my thing with computers, and and as far as fielding, doing things with the networking with the cadets and the Gold Coats and all that stuff, and it was great. I mean, couldn't ask for anything better.
How did the increasing use of computers and digitized information change the cadet experience?
Oh my God, yeah. Back in the Stone Ages, we had to type our papers out and use whiteout and stuff like that, and on a typewriter, a portable typewriter. And I remember, bringing a reel-to-reel tape recorder in to record 60s music while I was a cadet. And now, of course, that's all on the cloud. Everything's in the cloud. You can edit anything you want. The FMT formatter in 83 was, you had to embed commands inside of a text file to get it to format your output. Now, of course, you just type it and it automatically justifies it, automatically spell checks, does all that. So it drastically changed things. Here's the thing that it didn't change, and it's kind of unfortunate, in that it makes it easier for somebody to post something, okay, and everybody gets that post and does something bad with it, okay, and that's what I'm a little concerned about. That I teach online for 2 universities, and one of the things we use is turnitin.com, where the cadets have to know that there's ways to easily check stuff, okay, that's been turned in to see if it's been duplicated or plagiarized. And I don't think a lot of them understood that, at least not from the recent episode that happened. It's very disturbing to me. But I think that the pandemic caused that online stuff to happen, and it's unfortunate. It wouldn't have happened if it was in the classroom, if you had to go in the classroom and do it. So. Okay.
Now, since you retired in '97, and since retiring from the Army, we talked about your work with Pace University, and you were there from '97 to 2008.
Right.
And you're continuing to teach online courses. You've also started a company, the Frank J. Monaco.
Yeah, that's kind of like I did some consulting when I first retired, and I'll help an educational institution if they need help. It's not really a big. I'm not really actively involved. I had some health issues recently, and I'm trying to recover from them. Okay. So the company is not a big thing anymore, but it used to be. I used to do a lot of consulting.
Sure. You're also very involved with the class of 1970.
70, yeah. I've been, 92, when the internet was born, they appointed me Chief Information Officer. Nobody else wanted to do it, okay? And so I conduct Zooms with the class, and we have elections, every 5 years. Nobody ever runs against me. I don't know why, but they don't run. Nobody wants a job. And my wife said I spend too much time with the class, but I enjoy giving back because my sons were graduates. Sure. I owe a lot to West Point and the community. The class of 70 is a great class. It got a lot of good guys in it, and I think the Zooms have brought us closer together, actually. Okay, because there's a site, I think I sent you a link, where we've had about 400 or 500 Zoom sessions, the different cadet companies, 20 or 30 people on a Zoom at a time. I got to know people in the 1st Regiment, the 2nd Regiment, the 3rd Regiment that I didn't know. I was in the 4th Regiment. And you get to introduce yourself to them. They know me because I'm the only one allowed to send something out to the Distro 70 list. They don't want anybody else sending stuff out. And I have 2 rules. No politics, no religion. So those are the 2 rules, okay? And I don't like agita. Agita is upset stomach in Italian. So I don't like that. So I tell them, no politics, no religion. We kind of keep it clean. And we have a Facebook group, okay, that about 500 people part of it. We graduated 749. There's still about 650 of us still breathing. And, we're losing them much more rapidly now. But at least we get a chance to see people that we haven't seen in many years using Zoom. It's not the same thing, but we're thinking about doing some physical reunions maybe next year after everybody's vaccinated.
Okay, excellent. You all also do the National Conference on Ethics in America?
Yes, that's our class project. And in addition, the 50-year project is National Conference on Ethics was our 25th and 35th and 45th gift to the Academy. And we also have the area behind AOG. There's a class of 70 fountain there.
Yes.
Serve with integrity. The cybersecurity endowment is what we were given for the 50th. And we actually haven't given it to the USMA yet because we never had our 50th. But if we ever do, it'll be a formal presentation. They're using it now. And I think my old building, Spellman Hall, is part of that. Okay, out on South Post. Cybersecurity, and I'm really glad they're going that way because cybersecurity is very, very important, especially in 2021, as you could imagine.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about your family. You've mentioned your sons throughout.
Right.
Frank, Michael, Joseph, and Jeffrey.
That's right.
Frank, West Point 96.
Right.
Michael, West Point 98. Joseph, Air Force Academy 2001.
Right.
How are your sons doing?
They're doing fine. Yeah. Joseph, like I said before, I said, look, you can go to any school as long as it starts with the United States and doesn't end in Naval Academy. Okay, so they all took my advice. Okay, Jeffrey went to Sacred Heart University in Connecticut, and he's very skilled technician. He works with cameras and web systems. He's got a little girl named Mia, and who's my pride and joy right now. We have 15 grandchildren. Mm-hmm. Joe was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and he's class of 2001 Air Force. He was a runner, okay, and we were living at West Point, and he was O'Neill team captain. He went out to the Air Force Academy, saw the facilities out there. This would have been 2001, so 4 years before that, 97 or so. He went out to the Air Force Academy. He said, Dad, they got really nice facilities out there. I want to go, and I want to be a pilot anyway. So he went to the Air Force Academy. I said, that's fine, okay. And we learned a lot about the Air Force Academy after he went out there. Mm-hmm. And his proudest moment, I think, was he commanded the 728th Squadron in Turkey. And there's a beautiful picture of him on the website I sent you from Dropbox. It's a picture of him out in front of his company. There's a C-5 out in the background with all his troops out there. Really a great picture. And Michael works with satellites and imagery with National Geospatial Intelligence Agency out in the St. Louis area. He's got 3 little girls. And Frank is retired up in Watertown. He's actually a ski instructor. And he teaches for University of Maryland too online, okay. Computer science and stuff. Joe is going to go back to the Air Force base, Scott Air Force Base, and hopefully he'll get promoted next year to colonel if all goes well. It's amazing. We're getting old. We're getting really old.
And you and your wife are going to renew your vows.
That's right. We're trying
October.
We're trying. I was up at the chapel this morning, and I talked to the lady up there, Nancy.
Right.
She said to say hello, by the way. I understand you're involved with the Catholic Chapel. I was big with the Catholic Chapel senior year. Mm-hmm. Father McCormick, Monsignor McCormick, and Father O'Brien, Ed O'Brien. But anyways, we just want to have a ceremony where we renew our vows. And they said it'd be kind of cool because the cadets would see somebody coming back here 50 years later. To the day. It's the actual day. It's a Sunday, October 3rd. Nice. It's our 50th anniversary. So we're going to come back, if they let us, and renew our vows. Yeah, Paulette has been wonderful all these years. And all the boys, we couldn't ask for anything more. The grandkids are great, but we don't get to see them all, except for Mia. She lives locally. Sure. The rest of them, especially with the pandemic. But we're going to go out there this summer if all goes well. Go see all the boys.
What stone did you get in your ring?
A Lindy Star Sapphire. It's still there. I can't get it off, so it's staying there. Lindy Star Sapphire. And this, I don't know if you see this, but this is the latest. This is what we're coming to. This is called an Echo Loop. Okay, it's an Alexa device. Okay, that you wear. It's got a speaker and it's got a microphone, and you can press it and it'll do anything that an Amazon Echo could do at home. I'm testing it for Amazon. It's all right, but it's not ready for prime time yet.
Okay. Well, sir, I'm so glad you came in and shared your story with us today.
It was my pleasure.
This has been one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
What does West Point mean to you?
Everything. Everything. Yeah, and you could ask my wife that. She'll tell you the same thing. That next to my family, my class in West Point is right up there as being the best thing I ever did in my life, next to my wife and my family. But I mean, it taught me the value of integrity, and I try to do that in my day-to-day life. I try to infuse that to my sons and all of them. Be honest people and do the best you can every day, and to keep striving no matter what happens. And have hope for the future, because that's important. I really think that we still got hope no matter what's going on in the government. They can only do so much to mess us up, but I still think there's hope. And this is always a place we're going to come back to. My next move will be to the West Point Cemetery, okay. As far as I can see. So, yes, sir. Anyways, I want to thank you for inviting me here. I didn't expect it, to tell you the truth. I guess it was because I posted something on Colonel Patrick's page, but he's a great guy.
Well, sir, it's been an honor to talk with you and to hear your story.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.